Hello and welcome back. This video is an introduction to discrete random variables. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the meaning of discrete is first, because that can be a little confusing. We're going to talk about what a random variable is, and then specifically a discrete random variable. And we're going to cover some specific notation for discrete random variables that can be problematic or confusing at first. Okay, let's talk about the meaning of discrete. There are two different ways to spell it, and they each have a separate meaning. The first discrete is Discrete, and that's something or someone that is intentionally unobtrusive, or when we try and keep things private or confidential, that's being discrete. There's also discrete, that's spelled Discrete, and that's the discrete that we're talking about. And this discrete means separate or distinct. And in our case, it's also going to usually be countable, and sometimes it does not make sense to divide it in parts or into its component parts. So let's think about this. Some examples are children in a family, shoe size, people on planet Janet or Zidu, car crashes, or volcanic eruptions. So each car crash, each volcanic eruption, each person is separate or distinct and countable. And it doesn't make sense to have half of a volcanic eruption or half of a car crash. All right, now let's talk about a random variable. Now, a very broad definition of a variable is what we are looking at or wanting to know more about. That encompasses a lot. Now, a random variable is a quantitative or numerical variable whose values depend on chance. So let's say that this candy over here we're going to look at and we want to know more about it. Specifically, we want to know what is the chance that we pull out one of these gummy hearts. So let's say we know that there are 12 gummy hearts in this entire bag of candy, and there's 250 pieces. So that random variable is what we're looking at, and this is how we calculate it: the number of occurrences over the total number of possibilities. Now, discrete random variables are a random variable whose possible values can be listed. So remember that discrete is often, we can think of it as something that's countable. And then in particular, a random variable with a finite number of possible values in a discrete random variable. So that's a lot. Let's put an example to it to see if we can make more sense of it. So this is a school, and this school has grades 1 through 7. And in each of those grades, there's a count or a frequency. There's a number of students. And it doesn't really work to have a student that's in grade 1.5 or grade 4.5. They're going to be in one of these specific categories, and each category has a count. The probability for that category is the number in that grade level divided by the total number. So in this school, there's 2,200 students. So in first grade, the probability of randomly selecting, in this school, the probability of randomly selecting a first grade student is 314 out of 222. Now this is going to be a little note on notation because it can be a little frustrating, but I promise you got this. Oftentimes when we're talking about discrete variables, we use these curly braces. An uppercase letter equals a lowercase letter or number, and then we close curly brace. Now this uppercase is the variable that we're looking at, the variable in question. And this small x is often a number. So let's say we're going to look at volcanic eruptions, and we say that V is the number of volcanic eruptions. And we want to say, okay, we're going to look at when 2 of volcanic eruptions happen. So we say V equals 2. And this is just saying that we're going to look at when there are 2 volcanic eruptions. The other notation that we use is the P and then parentheses capital X equals lowercase x, close parentheses. This is the probability of that event happening. Not just the event that we're talking about, but the probability of it happening. So if we think back to the example from the previous slide about the students in that school, we want to know what the probability that the grade that they're selected is, because we gave it G, equals 1. We would calculate that by 314, or the number of students in the first grade, divided by the total number of students. So remember, this notation can be a little fuzzy sometimes, but if you've got the curly braces, we're talking about the event. And if you've got the P and the parentheses, we're talking about the probability of the event inside the parentheses. So just a quick recap. In this lesson, we talked about the meaning of discrete, specifically that it's separate or distinct instances, occurrences, or things. We talked about what a random variable was, a discrete random variable, and some specific notation. Now, our next video, we're going to be talking about probability distributions and histograms.